Well, hey everybody, and welcome to this midweek review with Mr. John. I am Mr. John, and guys, we have been going through the Easter season, the month of Easter, but it is the celebration of our risen Savior. But to get to the risen Savior part, we have to go through some of the bad things that happened to Jesus. Now, we can call them bad in the human sense, but they're actually good for us. And one of those things was after Jesus was arrested. Remember last week we talked about the Last Supper. Jesus predicted his death, and he also said that one of his disciples was going to betray him. And that we know was Judas. For 30 pieces of silver, he turned Jesus in. The Roman guards came up to him, and how Judas identified Jesus is he walked up and just gave him a kiss on the cheek. And that gave the Roman guard who Jesus was, and he was arrested. So they take Jesus to the Sadducees and the Pharisees, who put him on a kind of a trial. It was not a real trial because they were going to say he was guilty anyway, no matter what, because the Sadducees, who were the high priests of the land, and the priests were kind of like the church. The Pharisees were kind of the church priests, right? And the Sadducees were the guys in charge of these guys, right? But they all come together. They vote to get Jesus convicted, and now because it's the Passover, they really legally by their Jewish law could not do really anything to Jesus, like put him to death, which is what they really wanted to do. They just wanted to get rid of Jesus because what he was teaching was God's law, and they had kind of strayed from God's law and kind of made their own laws to really benefit them and the Jewish church at that time, right? So what do the Jews do? They decide they're going to take Jesus to the Roman court. So they take him to the guy in charge of the Romans in Jerusalem, and his name is Pontius Pilate. So they take him and they give him to Pontius Pilate and tell him that we have convicted this guy and you need to take care of him. So Pilate takes Jesus aside and he questions him, who are you? Are you a king? Just asks him all these questions. And Jesus, because he is Jesus and he's perfect, he answers every question truthfully, right? And Pilate goes about this and goes, I can't find anything wrong that Jesus has done, right? So he takes him back outside where there's a big crowd now. And he asks the crowd, what am I doing with this guy? He hasn't done anything wrong. He goes, I tell you what, our custom is that during the Passover, we find one of your prisoners, a Jewish person is being held that's of Jewish Hebrew descent, that's in our jails, and we set him free, just kind of as a show of faith, right? And Pilate kind of thinks he's outthinking the Jewish people here. He goes in and he grabs the worst of their criminals. He picks out a man named Barabbas. This guy was a murderer, a thief. He did just beat people, just horrible crimes. And everybody knew him. He just had a reputation of being this really, really bad dude. So Pilate kind of goes, okay, again, he washes his hands of all this. He kind of is always trying to make others make the decision for him. So he puts Jesus here and Barabbas here, and he yells to the crowd. He says, okay, I'm going to give you guys the choice. You can pick Jesus to be freed, or you can pick Barabbas to be freed. And I think Pilate probably thought they would pick Jesus because, like he said, he couldn't find any crime that Jesus had done. Barabbas was this just killer and just awful person, and guess who the crowd picked? The Sadducees and the Pharisees are screaming Barabbas. Now, I'm curious. Did some of the crowd start to say Jesus at all? Or did the Pharisees and Sadducees have this set up from the beginning? But no matter what, the crowd is screaming Barabbas at some point, all of them. And Pilate does the only thing he can do. He sits there and lets Barabbas free. So then he looks at the crowd and he goes, listen, now what am I supposed to do? Again, he's washing his hands. He's putting what he wants, the Jews want done to Jesus. He's not really making the decision here. He's leaving it to the crowd, and the crowd begins to scream, crucify him, which is just a horrible, horrible death. Pilate succumbs to what the crowd does. Takes Jesus back, and next week we'll talk a little bit more of what happens to Jesus after this point, but I want to talk about something else, and it's choices, right? We see a lot of different choices here, good and bad and indifferent, and well, I said good for us in the long run, but as far as we kind of look at these decisions, they were all really bad, right? First, you have Pilate. Pilate really makes no decision at all. He just stays neutral in this. And he just kind of sits there and steps back. And he doesn't care if it's right or wrong. Whatever the decision is made by the crowd, that's what he's going to go with. And that's a bad, bad way to make decisions sometimes. When we follow the crowd of popularity and they're making decisions that are on their behalf and not your behalf or the best decision to be made, it can get us into a lot of trouble. Pilate just refuses to make the decisions to sit there. He could have sat there and said, I find him innocent. I don't find nothing wrong that he's done, and I'm going to let him go. Pilate could have done that. And that's why Pilate gets a very bad rap in the story when we talk about Pontius Pilate, because his willingness to do nothing. Now we have the crowd, right? The Jewish leaders. And like I asked before, do you think some of the crowd might have been yelling for Jesus to be set free at some point and then change their vote, right? To when they hear the Sadducees and Pharisees screaming to set Barabbas free. Sometimes we come up with the right decisions, but we're easily swayed because of peer pressure, or we feel that our thought and thinking is not adequate to what should be done. Guys, Jesus was innocent of all crimes. He was perfect, right? He didn't do anything wrong. And the Sadducees and Pharisees were so against what he was teaching because it hurt them. And I don't mean physically hurt them, it hurt them in reputation, because what they were doing was not leading people to real godly existence. They were leading them to follow Pharisees and Sadducees' belief system. And that's no way to live your life according to God and Jesus in this moment. So guys, when we make choices, we want to make choices based on truth. The truth is, Jesus was perfect. Jesus was Lord. And he gets convicted right here. And in this moment, he's being taken back to prepare him to die. All those choices were wrong if you look at it from a human standpoint. But because Jesus and God had the ultimate plan, they knew that Jesus was going to be, the crowd was going to yell, crucify him, that he was going to be put to death. But it was for us. that he goes to the cross. And like I said, next week we will talk a little bit more about what happened after the decision that the crowd made to say crucify him. I hope you guys are having a great Easter season. I know a lot of kids are coming off of spring break and going back to school. Hey, I just wish you to finish well. You got about a month left of school. Keep working hard. Keep striving. Make the decision. Make the choices to finish the year well. So guys, verses coming up. Keep learning these verses. They will help you in the long run. It's a choice you can make. I hope you have a great day. Bye.
The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Psalm 27, 1a.